Welcome to this week's episode of the FullScope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'm your host, Matt Van Pelt, and with me today are FullScope IT's CTO, Dan Wolk, and Brian Amadeo from Business Development. Hello, gentlemen.
How are you?
Hello, Matt. How's it going?
Dan, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. Traveling a lot this summer, so get different backgrounds every podcast. Hopefully that's
I know it's
gonna straighten
exciting.
out soon. Yeah.
Brian, how are you doing?
I am doing well, gentlemen. Nice to see both of you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Is it still? How's the temperature out there in Arizona?
Still trying to cook ourselves out here. Well, now we're entering our season where we get rain as well, so we can add humidity to what was supposed to be a dry heat. It's wonderful. Actually,
Perfect.
it does help, believe it or not, just not right before it actually rains. Then it feels worse, and then it gets better.
Nice. All right. Well, hey, stay cool.
Right? How about yourself out in New York there, Matt?
Rainy today. Rainy couple of days. But I think it's supposed to be really nice this weekend. So that's like we're talking 76 for a high and sunny. So like the perfect weather, basically.
Nice.
Perfect weather
I
for
we have
a humid place.
Good forecast for the weekend as well.
Good. Hopefully I make the most of it and actually do something instead of just trying to figure out what I want to do all weekend and never do anything.
You figure it out every day on Monday. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, let's start this podcast off with our buzzword.
Breaking down the buzzword.
Business continuity planning. Business continuity
Three
planning
words,
is
technically.
Yeah, I know. These are like buzz phrases that I don't think we've had one word since our first test run. All right. Business continuity planning is a proactive process that organizations use to ensure critical functions can continue during and after a disaster. Dan, why is this important to a business owner?
Well, there can be a lot of reasons, but I'd say the most important thing is to consider how important computers have become to employees and the tasks that they do on a daily basis, and even just sometimes minute by minute to get through the process of their day. And it can be really difficult to unbundle the computer use from actually completing tasks that are critical to the business. So it was really a long-winded way of saying computers have gotten really important. And like any machine, they can break and in sometimes very spectacular ways. And we do our absolute best to keep them running and to have redundancy in the system and have our documentation in line so that we can fix problems as quickly as possible when they do come about. But sometimes bigger problems do arise, either from malware or crypto lockers or even storms or power failures. And business continuity planning is a way of looking at all of these possible things that can go wrong and what the impact will be on the business and what we can do to be ready for those problems when they come about.
What are some tools people can use to help them on their business continuity planning journey?
The most important is backups. Your data needs to be backed up, and you need some plan in place for what you're going to do when there are hardware failures, because hardware failures will happen. Typically, that involves either using a cloud provider with the proper redundancies in place so that if a server crashes, you can just start it back up somewhere in the cloud, or to have redundancy within the hardware that you do have your hands on in your offices, or the laptops or cell phones, or whatever's the critical piece to getting your job done, knowing that you can switch to another one. I'm sitting here with two laptops because I had a camera failure in one of them, which made recording a podcast difficult. So that's one step that I took while traveling, was making sure it was very important to me to have a laptop. So I just grabbed a second one.
Brian, when talking to like potential clients or even current clients for that matter, how do you stress the importance of something like this?
Well, yes, no, it is something that that I have a lot of conversations about. I mean, because every business has to be able to conduct business, right? And so there's so many ways. The last probably two or three new clients that we brought on all had some form of a business continuity issue or concern. So it's a pretty regular topic. One of them, as an example, was an email issue. Right? So their Exchange server wouldn't go online anymore. So I think they went 4 days without email. Not that many companies can survive. Well, I don't want to say they can't survive it, but notice an impact, right? I mean, that's tough to do. So everybody went to phones or what have you, right? That was not their plan. That was how they pivoted to deal with the situation. But and so we actually got them in a much better position as far as that goes. Another example was the company didn't realize until we started talking to them that they didn't actually have continuity on their BDR. So they had the appliance, right, but they didn't have anything beyond that. So they weren't thinking about how do we access those files that we need to maintain business. So it's a pretty common conversation, and I think part of it is because I've learned the importance. And so I try to bring that up, and I just try to ask those questions, like, what do you do in these certain situations? And every once in a while, hey, we get a surprise and someone has some good stuff in place. But I think plan is the really important word there, right? I think people believe that they have a way to deal with it until they don't, or until you've asked them questions that make them go, oh, what would we do for that? So yeah, it's a good one. We have a lot of those conversations.
No, I think it's also very important to revisit these periodically, because the way you use computers and the capabilities of the backup systems change over time. And even a lot of businesses have regulations that they need to be aware of. And as the regulations change, if you switch to using something like Gmail or WhatsApp or something as your backup communication, but you're under regulatory requirement to have all business communications recorded, you may be sidestepping some of the regulations as part of your business continuity planning, which could get you in trouble and may even have some fines attached to it.
There's a lot of regulation changes happening right now, too. I'm not even sure how businesses are keeping up on what the current policies are, but
Well, hopefully we're doing our part to help them.
right? Bring awareness.
Yeah, that was going to be a follow-up question is, what does FullScope do to stay up to date on all of that?
Requires a lot of reading, and it can be easier for us as an MSP because when we look at the regulations, we can apply it to a large number of customers, whereas like an individual manager at a small and medium-sized business may be overwhelmed by having to deal with this much change. So we can help really focus on what their issues are.
And some of the conversations that I have about this is, so we have CTO, CIO, and in a lot of cases, I think both of you do the job role of a CISO as well. So we have those resources, and a lot of businesses don't, or that's it can be an expensive resource. So One of the things that I like to let people know is that we have people that are dedicated to paying attention to these trends and changes and things so that we can help them with that. And it isn't something that they've necessarily got to think about. So that's the conversation I end up having. But I think it's an important one to note, right? That we actually have dedicated resources to know what these changes are and help them with that so they don't have to.
Awesome. Any final thoughts on today's buzzword? Buzz phrase.
Do it.
Do it. All right. Well, that is
Plan.
a great segue.
Make sure you know your backups are working.
There you go. So that's a great segue into this week's tech tip, which is our takeaway. Create an effective business continuity plan to ensure your organization can navigate unforeseen disruptions.
Well, if it isn't a tech tip.
To get started, you can follow these steps. Identify critical functions and resources, perform a business impact analysis to pinpoint vulnerabilities, list potential risks, devise strategies for maintaining operations, establish recovery procedures, involve stakeholders, regularly test and update the plan, and consider partnering with experts like FullScope IT for tailored strategies and support. For more information on how to create a proactive plan to protect your company in any unforeseen disruptions, check out our blog post, What is Business Continuity and Why is it Important? We'll have a link to that in the podcast description. It's also posted on our website, www.fullscopeit.com. All right, that brings us into this week's Story of the Week.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
This Story of the Week comes from Architectural Digest. The flying car was just officially certified for takeoff. What do we think about this, guys?
Long time coming.
And we've been promised this since what, like the 1930s?
If not longer.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, right? I think everybody thinks the car itself was what we've been waiting for, and I don't think that's the case. I think we could always figure that out. I think it's the infrastructure. Like, what are the rules? How do you know where to go? What is the, I think autonomy had a lot to do with this evolution finally seeing some results, because that was my thing. Like, I always go back to the Fifth Element, that movie, right?
Cool
where it
movie.
was like these layers of skyways.
Yeah, looked terrifying.
Yeah, that's my issues. I mean, I think drivers are bad enough. Now people can go vertical, start making so that's the part that I'm more interested in is what are the rules?
Yeah, and they haven't really been cleared for takeoff. It's not like you can buy one of these and like zip around and not get in any trouble. All they've really gotten clearance for is going to the next phase of testing. And it doesn't even include any of the things you were just talking about, Brian. There's a lot of people who are just thinking about that right now and building simulations, for how to get these things off the ground, where they're going, and back on the ground without causing problems. Crashes, falling on people, things like that.
Yeah, if you can't even fly a half a pound drone over a crowd without a particular license or clearance ahead of time, how about running to the store really quick and just want to go, brrr,
Yeah, that's unlikely to happen anytime soon. Even like the ultralight rules, you have to stay at least 500 feet away from any buildings or people. And also, fly it at least 500 feet, but you can't go high enough to get close to where the actual current aircraft are.
Right.
So that's a lot to contend with. And as soon as you get more than one of these flying around in an area, making sure that they don't crash into each other and making sure they don't go into restricted airspace, I think is going to take a lot of automation. My plan with any kind of automated car is that they're going to be ready at the time that I no longer want to drive myself. So, The world is doing a great job of meeting me on that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I do.
coming together.
Yeah, I do like in the article they mention those like things that'll take you from the airport to the city center to kind of just jump you over traffic, which I'm guessing those would be
Yeah.
piloted by someone, that can pilot something like that.
Well,
That's kind of intriguing.
all these are all classified as eVTOLs, but this Olive car it sort of goes the next step because they actually want you to like fly it home and drive it into your driveway, as opposed to being like dedicated ferry or taxi service to get to the airport. So that is exciting that it actually just becomes a car that can drive around. If I had the $300,000 to buy an extra car, I'd certainly want to be on their list.
But it's only $150 to commit today.
Right.
Hey, I guess we have some write-in questions from our director, producer, editor, all of the above, Michaela. And one of her questions is, would anyone here get one? I think, Dan, you just said you would.
Yeah, I definitely would. I might leave it parked for a while until the software updates get past beta. Just
I'll be the test mount.
won't.
I have no problems with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd do it too. I'd get one. And I guess the next question is, would you fly in one? And well, if isn't
By
that
the pilot?
I don't know. I guess I would if I was going to get one. I would fly in one. Unless that means somebody else is driving. Then I don't know. That's
I took that
scary
question
proposition.
as would you fly with being a passenger versus driving one?
I guess it depends on who was flying it. Like
Even
those shuttles from the airport sound like that'd be a safe bet.
Yeah, like Phoenix was one of the test beds for Waymo, right? For the autonomous Ubers, basically.
Oh,
and so they've been around here a long time. And even that, when I see it right now, because it's fully unmanned at this point, when I see that driving down the road, it's still weird. It's still an unusual sight to see.
Have you used one?
No. And I mean, honestly, because I don't really have that need, quite frankly. I don't know that this was a great place for practical application per se. I mean, like, I see more of a congested urban setting that makes a lot more sense where not as many people own cars. Most of the travels I'm doing are in that 20 to 40 mile range where I'm going to use my own vehicle. But I could see maybe, like, one of the areas that they do test them is down by ASU. So that seems like a really good application area, right? Where students that are there, they might not have a vehicle, need to get around, and it's just an alternative to an Uber or another form of shared transportation. But so to now go flying, it's a little bit of a leap. Pun intended.
Yeah. We were in San Francisco recently, and there are a lot of autonomous taxi testing services there, and it is a little disconcerting seeing these cars pull up next to you and it's totally empty.
There's nobody in there. Yeah.
But
steering wheel still moves.
I think adopting any new technology has this sort of level of discomfort, and this is just bigger, so the discomfort's greater, but we'll get over it.
And I'll go back. I think if we trended towards more and more and more autonomy and more connected vehicles that are aware of its other vehicle surroundings, I mean, the human's always going to be that variable that ruins it for everybody. Right? In comparison, like, I would trust if I knew 90% of the cars out there were all aware of each other, I would trust that scenario. For the most part, I'm sure we would see reduced amount of accidents until somebody walks out in front or rides a bike out in front, or you have that analog car that that ruins it for everybody else. I like to drive things, so I'm not suggesting that I want to see that as an entirely. But again, as we look at certain ways of transportation or certain purposes for transportation, I'm all for it. I'd love for everybody to not get behind the wheel after a night out when they shouldn't, right? To just hop in an automated vehicle and get home and not think twice about it. Like, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, and the final two questions that Michaela wrote, and they're kind of related. It's like, how do you think I'm guessing the GPS would work? And how do you think people would figure out how to go where they're going to go when there's no roads? How is that going to work?
Yeah.
Like what you said, there was be like lines projected ahead in the sky for you to follow.
That'd be cool, like heads up display, but it'd show you the road.
Yeah.
Like, that'd be cool. I think it's going to be more. I think we're going to punch in our destination, and I think it's going to take us there more so than we're going to pilot.
Right.
And
Air
just
traffic control for
seems
cars.
at least logical with the information I have at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like when you go on a commercial flight and you pull up your in-seat entertainment, you can always get these like map views of where you are with a little projection of the airplane on a globe and stuff like that. So I'm sure that there'll always be that kind of feedback, so that you don't feel like you're just flying around aimlessly. But I would imagine there's going to have to be a significant level of automation to keep these things on target and from crashing into each other.
Actually, something you said earlier, Dan, was as far as like the regulations about flying over structures or people or crowds or whatever. So, like, I guess that means they probably would follow the street grid initially, at least. There just have to be levels, to some extent, but that probably would make the most sense because at least it's designated transportation lines.
Yeah, from what I can see, this is all in the academic space right now, and there's people writing papers and doing simulations, but what we actually end up with is anybody's guess at this stage.
I'd be fine with a car that just hovers above the road. That way, if there's poor road conditions, it doesn't matter. Being upstate New York,
Right.
just to be able to
Actually,
hover over the snow and ice and just,
Yeah, if you think about from like not having to maintain roads the same way and things that money can be redirected towards the technology side of the infrastructure.
There you go. Hovercraft. That's where we start.
Yeah. Can't get snowed in, like you're saying, right? Can't get stuck or
Yeah.
ice is no longer an issue.
Float above it.
Well,
I'm all for it, though. I will say that. I'm like, let's see it happen. Let's do it.
I would imagine these don't fly so great when they're covered in ice, but
Oh, yeah.
Well.
Yeah. I mean, you're still going to have to dig it out if it's a lot of snow. Oh,
Good point.
all right. Well, great. That was a very interesting story. Yeah. So with that, I guess we'll end this week's episode. So thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the FullScope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'd also like to thank our panel, Dan and Brian. Thank you, gentlemen. And we will be back next week with another episode. So until then, stay behind your firewall.